Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
And James wants to speak to us from Clapham. Go for it, James.
Hi, Maajid. How are you today on Sunday?
I'm all right. It's a lovely day.
It's a lovely day, Maajid, and thank you for telling me you're on tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I shall be listening. Thank
Fantastic. Tell us what you think about this subject.
This subject, Maajid, it just reminds me that George Soros, his campaign started on Tuesday, and he wasn't wrong when he said that he would kick off in the next 3 days. It just makes me laugh. The civil service will come out with this, leak it to the press. It's the same civil service that did not have a plan for when we left the EU in that referendum on the 23rd. If they had a plan in place, the pound wouldn't have hit the floor and we would have had some sort of direction to go in. It makes me laugh that they now have a plan in place.
Yeah. So you don't believe this?
No, I don't. The doomsday scenario.
Yeah.
We've got the guy who's in charge of HMRC coming out and telling us that we've made the wrong decision. We've got the Bank of England telling us we've made the wrong decision. We've got the head of the NHS telling us we made the wrong decision. I am sick and tired. You work for the government, keep your mouth shut, and let the government do what it needs to do.
Wow, that's an interesting perspective. So that's actually, they're civil servants and they shouldn't really have a voice over political issues, which is quite consistent with our protocol in this country. And so that's what you're recalling here, James.
Yes, I am, because I'm sick to the back teeth of these people that want us to remain in the EU, tying our hands behind our back. Imagine, when I voted to leave, when you vote to leave something, you don't remain in part of what you've asked to leave. When I asked to leave the EU, it was a quite binary question, yes or no. You do not need the brains of an archbishop to say, if you said no, you voted to no to leave everything. And I'm sick and tired of people like Mr. Campbell, Mr. Soros, Mr. Blair, trying to tell us and trying to meddle with what we have done. We want to leave. We are going to leave, no matter what nightmare, ghoulish policy that they think is going to happen when we leave on the...
James, do you think the civil servants leaked this then? Do you think they did this on purpose? Because you referenced Soros's campaign. Do you think that, because this was meant to be locked up in a safe, these doomsday scenarios, how do you think this came to the attention of the press?
Maajid, absolutely. Mr. Soros quite clearly said on Tuesday that the gloves were off. He donated £750,000, and his exact words were, in 3 days' time, it's going to start. And you know what? He was not wrong. We've got the civil servants going behind our back. We've got everybody. We've got Nicola Sturgeon going behind our back and committing treason by speaking to Barnier. We've got AC Grayling turning round and saying to Verhofstadt to give us the worst deal possible with the Liberal Democrat MEP sat next to him and agreeing with what he said. It's an absolute disgrace.
Now, James, to be fair, I mean, you know, I try and be fair, and I don't believe the doomsday scenario is indeed realistic, but at the same time, nor do I believe that a no-deal scenario is realistic, but you seem to.
No, I don't. I want to deal, because we know we have honoured, so we must honour some agreements.
Yeah.
Going back to the agreements which they are tying us into and saying that we should be paying £40 billion, Maajid, it seems that the French and the Germans seem to be handpicking what we're involved in. We're not going to be part of the new GPS system, according to the Germans. French don't want us into the security. That's fine, Maajid. If they want to threaten us, they need to understand we're the biggest spender on defence in Europe. We've got the best intelligence service in Europe. If they want to lock us out of what they want to put us into, because they want us into this, they don't want us into that. You know, make your mind me. Are we bound by this agreement or bound by certain parts?
All right, James, thank you very much for that call. Quite forthright in your views there about this, and it's kicked off the debate. Back to Sarah from New Malden. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I find this absolutely bizarre. We had a vote. We're ready to leave. Even people I know that voted Remain. The minute this soft and hard Brexit is just who made up this phraseology? We voted to leave. it's time to leave. I understand that there are a lot of people that aren't happy about it.
But Sarah, you've got to understand something, though. Just as I've been trying over the course of this hour, as you may have heard, I hope, to understand different perspectives on this. You know, when you say we voted to leave, that means different things to different people. So the terms soft Brexit, hard Brexit, no deal scenario, these are all words that we use to describe what different Brexiteers mean by Brexit, because even among Brexiteers it means different things.
Well, but the thing is, I think there's an awful lot of conflation happening here. You know, I understand there are some people on both sides that either vehemently leave or vehemently remain. However, we had a vote, and that's how it works in a democracy. We had a vote, we need to leave. That means leaving the customs union. None of this, people didn't know what they were voting.
Well, no, but Sarah, see, what you've just added there, that means, you know, as in what leave means is, that's your interpretation of it, and of course another Brexiteer might say something different. Let me give you an example, Sarah. Michael Gove's vision of Brexit and Boris Johnson's vision of Brexit is quite different, I'd argue, to Nigel Farage's vision of Brexit, and, you know, they were three leaders in the campaign.
That might well be true, and I'm sure if you got Labour politicians that would discuss Labour perspectives on things and Conservative perspectives, but the main fundamentals, we were told that if we voted leave, that we'll be leaving the customs union. I genuinely find it bizarre that this negativity is astounding. You know, all the Armageddon we were told that was going to happen when we leave hasn't, and yet people still...
We haven't left yet, Sarah. No, come on, Sarah, we haven't left yet.
Yeah, well, we heard that. We haven't left yet. Yeah. I know we haven't left yet, but we should have left. And we should now be... There's so many things that we could be doing. It's bizarre. And one thing I would say to you, I actually campaigned for leave. Yeah. I never, in all of my thought processes and all of the reading I did about it, I never for one it had anything to do with immigration. This is fallacious.
Oh,
it was to do
all right,
with
Sarah. No, but come on, Sarah. Come on. We all remember the hordes coming over the border campaign poster. Come on, Sarah. You may not have voted over immigration, but the campaign did.
Well, but we all remember hearing we were going to be, you know, straight away there was Armageddon.
I'm not defending that. You've just heard me over the course of this hour saying those scenarios may not be realistic. But you can't argue, just like I can't argue that the Remainers didn't do that, you can't argue that Brexiteers didn't stoke fears of immigration.
Well, the only thing I would say to you, of all the people I know, and this were people that were Conservative voters, Labour voters, from the London bubble through to up north, and all of the people I knew that voted leave, none of them had the immigration as their reason.
All right.
Now, maybe I'm lucky. Maybe I'm lucky I don't have friends like that. But, you know, please don't.
Hi, Sarah.
Please don't.
Yeah, but you didn't. No, but you didn't hear me say that. It was a caller. But thank you very much, Sarah. There from New Malden.
On one thing, you can't limit people's birth rate for a start. You can't suggest that. And the bombings that take place so often happen. The bombings and the terrorist attacks. I just don't understand, really. I don't understand why it's a first or a second generation who are so moved to act in the way they do against countries which have offered them a home. I don't understand.
Yeah, quite often they'll bite the nipple that they suckle from, of course.
Well, just careful of the language, Danny, and the visuals in a way, can you?
Mate, I'm just being real. If you want to sugarcoat it,
I'm just asking you politely, Danny, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm just telling you the truth. And a lot of people don't want to hear it. So if we don't establish some kind of cuts and controls, you know that the population of the third world and developing world rises by 5%.
But what are we supposed to do, Danny? What are you supposed to do apart from just live the way that is the right way to live for you, and to lead by example, and to keep, you know, educating, showing tolerance, democracy, freedom of speech? That is the only way, logically, to counter what is clearly a foul and vile message, which is getting through to particularly some young men. That's the only way. We have to lead by our own example, do we not?
Yeah, but if we lead by example, that's all well and good. But if we don't cut and severely restrict immigration from these countries, what you'll find is our way of life will dwindle and wither away. And in 100 years' time, our great-grandchildren, the country that we know now, will not be the same. And we need to take action because it's weak-minded people at the moment that have led to this. We've had governments that have successively let us down and led to this. In 1 or 2 generations, we've gone from having no issues whatsoever and 5% of the population causing us so many different issues. But other groups are not. And it needs to be exposed. It needs to be talked about.
Danny, we're talking about it now, and I'm moving on. I appreciate your point of view, and it's a point of view which is
It's the right point of view.
Well, it's a point of view that is reflected in the text.
It's a native point of view. It's my point of view.
Well, no, you don't have to. You've had your say, Danny, and I appreciate you calling. Thank you very much indeed.
Robert in Romford. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Basically, my idea was, why don't we end the Commonwealth to assuage those people who mainly voted to come out of Europe for the immigration side of things?
Well, yes, we could.
For example, if you take, for example, healthcare assistants, they're largely made up of Africans, okay, Nigerians and Ghanaians. Now, the way I see things, Nigeria is a very wealthy country with plenty of natural resources. It has 2 main problems, Boko Haram in the north and corruption, which is endemic in Africa anyway. And my idea is that instead of running away from problems like that, the Nigerians should stay and make their country a better place instead of running away to this country. That's the first point. And the other point I want to make
and
is...
stay in the EU, you're saying then? Come out of the Commonwealth instead?
Not necessarily. What I would say is we could then instigate a more a phased withdrawal from Europe. For example, starting with no free movement of Eastern Europeans, for example. So we could have free movement of the original handful of European countries, the Western European countries. And this would start to, because the whole idea is the whole aim of this is for people to be able to buy or rent a home at a reasonable price, and they can't do that at the moment. I can speak from experience because in 1988 I actually bought a house myself without a mortgage, and I worked for a shipping company. I was probably the second lowest paid employee there. Only the cleaners were probably earning less than me. And just by myself, saving for 15 years, I was able to buy a house for $63,000, an ordinary gold standard.
Well, there are lots of stories like that, but isn't the real problem? It's not particularly the EU or the Commonwealth or anybody else. It's the fact that our governments have not planned to build any more houses. They stopped building houses, and they've put obstacles in the way of building houses. That's the problem. We have not built enough homes. You're quite right. We haven't built enough homes. No.
But I'm.
So do we solve that by saying it's all the fault of immigration?
No, but what I'm saying is, why has this point not been raised about bringing the Commonwealth to an end? So that we could control
I think
immigration from the Asian subcontinent plus Africa. Okay.
I don't think the Queen would like it.
Well, she may not be around for too much longer. We could make it coincide with, when her...
I think Prince Charles is very committed to it as well. I don't think the Commonwealth will be going anywhere any time. Clearly, the disconnect is you cannot have a policy where there's continuing net migration in large numbers and not deal with the housing issue, which is what successive governments have done. Robert, thank you. Elena is in Bayswater. Hello.
Oh, hello. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that all this doomsday talk is just ludicrous.
Right.
I mean, if, for example, the French or the Germans were to stop us using their airports, that would actually be a declaration of war.
Well, that sounds like a doomsday scenario then.
Yeah, but they wouldn't do it because they don't want
No.
to actually declare war.
But you've still got to arrange things. If you're going to have flights in and out of countries with new agreements, you've got to actually have those agreements. You've got to set the flight times. You can't just hope it's all going to happen all right.
Well, you do. Well, then you set the flight times.
Yeah, but they haven't.
I mean,
They haven't even got an agreement on it. They haven't dealt with this issue.
Well, I mean, I'm just giving that as an example.
Sure. Well, it's a very good example because people in the aviation industry are tearing their hair out. They're saying, well, what is going to be the arrangement? We're only months away now and we still don't know.
Well, because we're talking, because we're talking sort of blackmail at the moment. And for example, you know, the very idea that the Europeans are going to stop trading with us is ludicrous. I mean, they're making much more money out of us than we are out of them. I mean, I really can't understand why the politicians just don't go straight to businesses, you know, starting with the big ones.
Well, but businesses
through.
will want to trade, of course they will, but you've still got to come to an arrangement.
Well, I don't really see why anything should change, really.
Well, because we're EU, so you have to have new arrangements in place. We have to know what's in lorries, where it's going, where it's come from.
Well, the thing is that there is that all the goods that we import and export outside the EU,
yes,
you know, sort of travel backwards and forwards on a sort of barcode system.
Yes.
There was an article.
Sounds a very good idea, but where is that barcode system? We haven't sorted it out. I mean, it's just
it's already running. It's already running.
But it's not running in those lorries that are coming to and fro the EU. Elena, I wish I could talk to you longer. Thank you so much for calling.
0345 60 60973, and we're going to David on the line from St Albans. Speak to us, David.
Hi there, Maajid.
Hello.
Yes, of course, the long-term aim of Islam is to convert everyone to Islam, and these people in prison.
Is that the case, David? Is that really the case for that every devout Muslim believes that?
Yes, you know that it's in the doctrine of the Quran, isn't it?
You just heard a Muslim on radio say he wishes he joined the intelligence services to stop terrorists.
Well, that's one, isn't it? But there's 20,000 on a watch list, apparently, aren't there?
Yeah, 20,000 out of 5 million in this country.
Yes, but 20,000 is still a large number, isn't it?
I didn't say it wasn't. I'm the one who gave you that number. I just opened up my show saying it was a large number. That doesn't mean every single Muslim wants to take over this country, though, David.
No, they don't. No, I agree with you. Yeah. But it's the aim of the people that are doing the terrorism.
Yeah, of course it is. That's the aim of the terrorists, definitely. Yeah.
So the thing is that everyone goes on about the right wing. There have been several marches in London which were given a press blackout because that was for freedom of speech, and this is what people are going to lose. It's happening, and.
So you don't? So do you not think that there is another concern with right-wing extremism in this country?
No, I don't.
Not at all.
Not extremism. No, it's a reaction to what's happening to
Well, I mean, chicken and egg. I mean, that doesn't really get us very far, does it, David? Because the Islamist terrorists will tell you that hold on. The Islamist terrorists will tell you that theirs is a reaction to the invasion of Iraq. It doesn't really get us anywhere, does it? To start talking about action and reaction. At the end of the day, why is it that surely, if there is a problem with right-wing extremism, whether it came first or last, it's still a problem.
It's not a problem because can you name any right-wing extremists?
Yeah, I can actually. Yeah, Darren Osborne just ran his van into a group of Muslims outside a mosque.
One man, yes, and that man apparently he hit was had.
What about the killer of Joe Cox, MP David?
That's two men.
Oh, so first it starts with, can I name a right-wing extremist? I name one, you say that's just one. I name a second, that's just two.
Yeah.
David.
Okay, now we're maybe running a bit short. Can you name any other ones?
Well, is this a memory test, David? I've just given you two names.
It's very unbalanced, isn't it? That's the thing.
Well, I'm not saying it's not. You're speaking to the wrong man here, David. I'm the first to say that the threat of terrorism in this country is disproportionately coming from jihadists. That doesn't mean that there isn't a threat coming from the right wing.
Yeah, but it's a very small threat, isn't it? That's the point. It's a very small reaction to the number of people that have
David, what point are you trying to make? Because whether it's a larger threat, a medium threat, a small threat, or a threat in between, I mean, what are you? Is this a competition? Is this a game show? You know, name a right-wing terrorist and I'll give you a balloon.
Look at both sides of it and think if there hadn't been the terrorist attacks, there wouldn't have been the right-wing attacks.
And that logic is precisely the logic extremist Islamists use when they say, if you hadn't invaded Iraq, we wouldn't have done 7/7. It's a flawed logic, David. It's flawed because it seeks to shirk responsibility for one's own extremism and place it on innocent people. Thank you very much, David, for calling in. That's David from St Albans. And Brian wants to speak to us from Washington, Tyne and Weir. Tell us what you think, Brian.
Hi, Maajid. I believe that the only way to combat the situation with the jihadis in this country is to make every single Muslim carry an ID card and they have to produce it on the street and asked by the police. So we know who they are, what they're doing, where they come from or whatever, and what they're up to. And if they haven't got their ID card, they should be arrested and locked up.
Oh, really, Brian?
Well, that's the way I see it. We want to try and discourage...
So only Muslims have to carry ID cards?
Well, yeah, because they're the ones who are blowing people up.
And only Muslims then get locked up if they don't have the ID card on them, yeah?
Yeah,
so,
because if there's gangs in them and they're looking suspicious, then... And also...
Well, before you go to the also, let's explore this idea a bit more, Brian.
To see what's going on.
Hold on, Brian. Before you go to the also, let's explore this this particular idea, this genius idea of yours a bit further. How do you identify who a Muslim is?
How do I identify a Muslim?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
What do they look like?
Well, that's a very strange question to ask because it could be anybody. It could be somebody who's like British converted. I mean, somebody who's daft enough to convert to Islam. It could be English, whatever.
Exactly. So in other words, how on earth are you going to decide who to give ID cards to and who not? If we're talking about a religion here that anybody could adopt.
Well, not really, because obviously, if the point is, they should have ID cards, and if there's gangs of them hanging around...
No, but you just said, if there's gangs of them hanging around, you just said you don't know what them looks like, so how do you know that's them?
No, but I'm talking about Muslim areas like Dewsbury and Bradford and parts of...
So we just implement ID cards by area, whether there's Muslims or non-Muslims living in those areas?
Well, no, because they're all over the place, aren't they? So everybody should have...
Yeah, you see, Brian, you're not making much sense. And how do you now sound any different to what Hitler did by marking Jews in Germany?
Well, no, because I'm not racist. I've got nothing against Hindus or Sikhs. They're very welcome.
I didn't say you're racist, Brian. I didn't say you're racist. I asked you how is this any different to Hitler's policy of marking Jews in Germany?
Well, it's not market. It's carrying some kind of ID around with them. What we'd actually be trying to do is to discourage people from hanging out in gangs, and if they want to live here, they have to accept our society, don't they? Really.
So what if they were non-Muslim gangs? You ever heard of such a thing?
Say that again. Sorry, I missed that.
Gangs that aren't Muslim.
Gangs aren't Muslim.
No, what if there are gangs that are not Muslim, like the drug gangs that are stabbing each other in our streets? They're not Muslim gangs.
As well.
Sorry?
I'm not leaving them out.
Oh, they should have ID cards too?
Well, again, it's difficult to give them ID cards, only because obviously they do, you know what I mean? It is a difficult one to do, to give everybody ID cards.
You sound like you're thinking, you're straining a bit here, Brian, thinking really hard about the practicalities, but allow me to suggest to you that it's not only difficult to identify non-Muslim gang members, it's difficult to identify Muslim gang members, because as you precisely said yourself, that it's a religion. It doesn't have a particular look. So thank you for that strong effort there, Brian. But I suspect we are quite a millennium or two away from even considering your idea as being in the slightest realm of possibility or reality.
0345 6060 973 for your thoughts on this speech by Maajid Javid today, saying the terror threat is going to be intense for at least the next 2 years. Stephen in Lincoln, hello.
At least the next 2 years. Are you having a laugh? Do you think it's just going to take 2 years to get rid of this problem? I mean, successive governments have sold us down a river of blood of Islamic rape and murder because they're too gutless to say it how it is. I mean, I despair at Theresa the Appeaser appointing this Muslim Home Secretary. And is it no coincidence, within moments of his appointment, someone that spoke out against the extremes of Islam is put in prison with a press ban. So why does that smell your fair?
Are you talking about Tommy Robinson?
Oh, are you allowed to say his name?
Yeah, you are. Yeah. He was. Yeah, he was being put in prison for committing a crime, Stephen.
Well, no, he wasn't. Actually,
he was.
It was an absolute load of rubbish.
No, he was.
Believe what you want to believe.
I believe what I know to be true.
Liberal broadcasting. As you
oh
should
dear.
Be, you spout this. Yeah, you spout the same old rubbish when you don't like to hear the truth because you can't handle the truth.
I can handle the truth.
Why has the far right risen? Why do you think that is? Because they know the government aren't going to protect us, so they have to do it ourselves.
Do you support far right violence? I
say it's self-defence. Now
you support violence, right? Well, I won't keep you on the phone in that case. Thank you, Stephen. Another Stephen from Warrington. Hello, Stephen.
Hello. How are you, Sheila?
I'm okay, thanks.
I think there is a feeling, a sense across the country that people don't feel safe. And I think the government or the Home Office or whichever department it may be can do something about it. There's apparently 22,500 people on terrorist watch list, whichever form of terrorist watch list altogether. If the general public knew, or if the government interned these people, because they're not on terrorist watch lists for a reason, the general public would feel a huge sense of relief knowing we're not just watching them, we're actually taking them off the street, so don't worry, they're not round your corner. I know financially and logistically it'll be incredibly difficult, but I think the sense of relief, the sense of something's actually being done, because once they're being watched on this watch list right now, no one knows who they are, what's being watched, where they are. So
whether they live near you or not.
That's right. So we're all on bated breath, just waiting. Is something going to happen? We're at the highest rate at the terror threat level as we speak. Something's bound to happen, or very likely to happen. If they just interned everyone... My problem is that they're watching these people trying to get to the head of the snake, so to speak, for use of a terminology. They're never going to come to this country, these heads of these whichever groups. So why not take the head out of it, take the foot soldiers off the streets, and then watch who's coming in to visit them, watch who's coming in, passing them information.
But you can't just take people. You can't just take people off the streets, however unpleasant they might be, just until they've actually been found guilty of a crime.
No, I get that, but these are on terrorist watch lists. So I would imagine that not every one of them, I would hope not every one of them have intentions of committing terrorist acts, but there must be some on there who are known to be terrorists and being very closely watched. Even if it's just those ones that they know have direct links to direct terrorist organisations.
Or have been in jail already and have been released.
Absolutely. And the other point on the jail, I mean, Maajid earlier today said about people turning to Islam in jail or being reverted or converted whilst in jail. Again, logistically be very difficult, but why can't you just have Muslim-only prisons so the non-Muslims don't get influenced that way? I know that might sound a little bit racist, and I don't mean to be.
No, but it's not. You're right to. I think you're suggesting that it isn't only Muslims who are radicalised in jail, and radicalised is the word that's used in relation to Islamist terror, when in fact all kinds of versions of criminality are radicalisation of another human being. But it, in a sense, all that creates is a single place where the same thing can happen.
But if, for example, I'll use the Muslims just because that's the largest group that we're speaking about. I appreciate that there's far-right terrorism and far-right extremists. I appreciate that. But Maajid said today that a lot of people are converting to Islam in jail because it's under fear. And when they go in there, it's a safety blanket.
Yes.
Come to Islam and we protect you. So if all the practicing Muslims at point of arrest was in segregated jails, and a Muslim then gets arrested further down, they go into that jail.
Well, I'm going to have to leave it there, Stephen. Thank you for your call. And David, on that question of whether the DUP is cherry picking too much about when it will and won't kick up a stink.
Well, I just have to say, it'd be a shock the rest of the United Kingdom, but the DUP are good at negotiating. They would get what they want for their people.
Should we send them into into Brussels for us?
I believe if the DUP was in the hot seat as Prime Minister, they would get a better deal than the Tories.
Arlene Foster would do a better job.
Arlene Foster would do a better job because she is the person who is right at the very top of Northern Ireland politics, and she is there, in my opinion, one of the best leaders that we ever had.
And if she's the only woman in Northern Ireland with a choice on abortion, you're happy with that, are you?
Yeah, I believe that abortion is wrong. It's killing of a human life, a potential of a human life, which could. And if you go down the route of England, Scotland, Wales, and it will mean a holocaust of babies will be murdered. There was 9 million babies murdered in England, Scotland, and Wales, which is, in my opinion, another holocaust.
David, thank you for your call. David in Belfast.
Phil's in, I don't know how you pronounce it, Crowell, is it, in Lincolnshire? Hello, Phil.
Hi, yeah, it's Crowell.
Okay. What would you like to say?
Well, I've heard a couple of times during the day people talking about the report that was mentioned in the newspaper about within 2 weeks we'd be running out of medicines and food and fuel. And I didn't understand about the fuel bit because I thought, well, we make our own here. All our fuel doesn't come from Europe. All our fuel comes from Venezuela and other places around the world in crude oil tankers. It's refined in Ellesmere Port and places down south and up in Scotland. We have our own refinery, so all your road fuels and your kerosenes, we're self-sufficient in that anyway. And also people talking about fields full of rotting vegetables. I live in a very rural area, and one of my friends has one of the biggest farms in the district. He has very few people work for him because everything he does is done by machine. Nobody goes to fields to pick potatoes. It's all lifted by tater harvesters.
Well, no, but they do pick fruit, though. I mean, that's why in your area of the country, there are hundreds of thousands of Eastern European temporary workers who do that sort of work.
Right, well, most of the soft fruit in the UK comes from Perth in Scotland. That is the area.
But in your area of Lincolnshire, that particularly around Boston, there are a lot of Eastern European people employed in the horticultural sector, are there not?
Well, I believe so, but I'm not entirely certain what they do. But
they pick fruit. It's as simple as that, Phil.
But many of you have views on Anne Robinson talking about how union chiefs and MPs used to try to get into her bedroom when drink perhaps got the better of all and sundry. Alf in Halifax. What are you going to tell me, Alf? Good morning.
Hello. Well, I think myself that in today's world, I think women are using sex as a weapon, really. In my time in work...
Right. When did a woman last use sex against you, Alf?
Well, you mean other than the wife?
Yes, other than the wife, yes.
No, they haven't, because I've been very protective of myself along them lines.
Right.
But what I'm saying is I have witnessed... I've only ever worked at 3 jobs.
Right.
And in each of them, I think I've seen women using it to enhance their position, shall we say.
Really?
You know.
Yes.
Yes, so.
You don't recognise the problems of Me Too and men who are in powerful positions exerting undue pressure?
I think it has worked that way as well.
Right.
But I don't think it's to anything like the degree that women like to think of it as.
All right. Al, thank you for that. From your experience of the 3 workplaces you've been. Peter's in Croydon. Peter, what can you tell me? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. First-time caller.
Oh, good to have you on, Peter. What are you going to tell me?
Well, what I want to say is that we always hear about the men being rude and unpleasant to the women, but what about the women who are rude and unpleasant to other women, such as the lesbian women, for example?
What?
That happens as well. I mean,
yeah. Have you seen lesbian women being rude to other women?
Absolutely. I work down at...
You're not going to name a company, are you? No.
No, but I work very closely to where tennis was being played.
Right.
Okay, so let's think of women tennis players, okay?
Ah, yes, I've read about this.
Yes, and the fact that young women tennis players had to have a chaperone walk them around because of other women who were going after them. But we don't think about that, do we?
Well, it's not quite the same, is it, as drunken MPs wandering around trying to sleep with young female journalists as...
No, but if a young woman is being pursued by anybody, male or female, it is just as bad.
I would agree with you. Yes, I would agree. Of course, it's not right that they're pursued by anyone, whether it's a drunken trade union boss or a lesbian tennis player. Extraordinary how we got there. Peter, thank you. That was a rare moment. Lisa in Yaxley, which I think is in Cambridgeshire, isn't it? Is that where am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not actually there. I'm driving south on the A1.
The old A1, an honest road.
Yeah, so I'm glad this subject's come up. I've only been listening to LBC for a couple of months now.
This is sensational.
Yeah, I think that being English and proud now is suppressed. So I'm 40 in December.
Oh, congratulations. Are you planning anything special?
Cape Verde, thank you very much.
Wow, that's pretty special.
It will
Fantastic.
be. But I've got a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old child that doesn't see England how I do.
Right.
Because it's not celebrated in school anymore for St. George's Day. There's a stigma behind flying your flag.
Though,
when you're English.
in 2 weeks' time, everybody will be flying flags, won't they, for the World Cup?
For the World Cup, yeah. But what happens on St. George's Day? Nothing.
Right, right.
And St. Patrick's Day, it's a big event. Everybody celebrates it. It's proud to be Irish.
Yeah.
I don't think you can be proud to be English anymore.
Oh, you
in
can.
England.
In 2 weeks' time, you'll be able to. People will...
Every 4 years is not good enough, though, is it, really?
No, possibly not.
Schools are not... My children say that it's racist to say that you're English. It is very suppressed nowadays, and your last caller saying about freedom. Freedom is being suppressed in the UK as well, massively at the moment. There isn't freedom of speech. There isn't freedom of saying what you want.
What are you doing? Respectfully, Lisa, what are you doing now? You're just saying it, aren't you? Isn't that great that you can?
I am, and I do think, the census forms, the passports, a Welshman can say they're Welsh, an Irishman can say they're Irish, and a Scotsman can say he's Irish. As an English woman, I cannot, on a form on my passport...
Well, you can, because there's a box other, doesn't it? And it's important to... I know what you're going to say. You should have English in your own right, and I understand it, and there is a very, very valid argument to that, and it does seem unfair. And I get that. But the idea, therefore, that we're not perhaps free to speak, I think, is a stretch. Lisa, let's talk again. Thank you for finding this radio station as well. We'll talk before your birthday, because that's a few months. Safe driving to you.
Chris from Reading, tell us what you think.
Oh, hi, yes. Yeah, well, we're very good at being able to sweep things under the carpet and just say lessons have been learned. There's Rotherham, Jimmy Savile.
Yep.
We've just put a guy in prison for being a journalist and highlighting...
Who's that, Chris?
It's Tommy Robinson.
No, that's not why he was put in prison, Chris.
Yeah, but he was put in prison previously.
Well, he was convicted last year for contempt of court. Yeah. And let go, and told that if he repeats the offence, then the suspended sentence will be implemented. Hold on, Chris. Hold on, Chris. And then he repeated the offence, and the sentence was implemented. And that's putting aside my own anger at the unjust treatment of the girls that were groomed and the cover-up scandal in Rotherham, and the official inquiry into that found there was a scandal. I've spoken about that openly on LBC, but it doesn't serve us to pretend that it doesn't serve us to pretend that Tommy Robinson was jailed simply for reporting. That's just simply not true.
Why was he put in prison with Muslim extremists and almost killed in prison? When they knew
Chris, you know what? I'm afraid, because I don't know what's going on in prison, I can't entertain and speculate about that.
But that's corruption, isn't it?
Well, I don't know what's going on in prison, and so I'm not going to comment on stuff I don't know about. What I do know is he was reconvicted by a judge for contempt of court, not for reporting like we can report on LBC. He violated a court order, which, actually is a sign of a lack of corruption, because the rule of law stands in this country against everybody, no matter who they are. Chris, thanks for calling in. And Nick wants to speak to us from Solihull. Go for it, Nick.
Hello there. Well, first of all, I'd like to correct you on your pro-European stance. Wasn't it blatantly obvious that when we voted, 17.4 million people gave the two fingers up to the European Union? And
half the country, half the country.
Pardon? Yeah, half the country.
Yeah, the other half didn't.
So we're not pro-you, are we? How can we be?
It's 52-48 there, Nick. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like you can't say...
The majority of people voted...
Yeah, that's right. Nick, I'm not disputing... It's not about Brexit, Nick. I'm not disputing that.
I know you're not disputing it, but let's put the equation in perspective. We voted to leave, meaning that we're not pro-European.
Well, to put it into perspective, the word perspective means let's actually look at the full facts, and 52% and 48% is quite a narrow margin, Nick.
Okay, well, he's splitting hairs on that then. Well, the reason...
I'm not the one who raised it.
I was interviewed by the Guardian newspaper, and I predicted a domino effect. Because the EU has deserted Italy, Greece, and all these other countries have now become Eurosceptics. The reason being is that, obviously, the migration problem, which was also caused by George Soros, who invested $18 billion to fund open borders. As a consequence, Mrs. Merkel, she's lost her power sort of seat as such, and the new Italian government is rightly so very anti-European, because let's be frank about it. None of these commissioners have ever been elected by the general public.
Well, European Parliament... Hang on a minute. Nigel Farage sits in the European Parliament and he's elected.
He's an MEP, he's not a commissioner.
Yeah, but the Parliament is elected and the European Council is in charge. The European Commission, yes, is unelected. That's like saying that Whitehall's not elected, the civil service isn't elected. It's because they're the bureaucracy. The European Council, Nick, which runs the European Union, is made of ministers who are elected in their respective countries.
The Commission has got...
No, but the Commission... Nick, respond to this, please. Answer this. The European Commission are bureaucrats. That's like saying Whitehall and the civil service aren't elected. But the European Council that runs the European Union and the European Parliament that legislates for it are both elected bodies and they run it, and the Commission are the bureaucrats. Do you understand, Nick?
Yes, I do.
Right, so what that the Commission isn't elected? That's like arguing Whitehall isn't elected.
They are elected by a secret ballot.
Who is?
The commissioners.
No, but okay, all right. But I'm saying that doesn't really trouble me, because the European Council that runs the European Union is comprised of ministers who are elected in their respective countries. But Nick, thank you very much. That's Nick there from Shelagh. Greg wants to speak to us from Edinburgh.
Hello there, Maajid. Thanks for taking my call. I just wondered, would you rather that we had unpopulist governments?
Yeah, I would actually, yeah.
So that's glad you say that, because to me your whole argument is quite patronising.
How is it patronising, Greg?
Well,
I'm expressing my political view.
Well, no, but I just get the impression from some of the discussion that people seem to think that there's some sort of moral high ground to be taken, and that you are sure that you are morally superior to some people who disagree with your take on the EU and with certain sort of political issues.
I tell you, Greg, in my own prescription for what needs to be done, I address precisely that we shouldn't feel morally superior to those who've lost their jobs in the working class communities, and then we should address inequality. I mean, that's precisely what I'm saying, that it's the moral superiority that's been going on for so long, which is partly the problem. Basically, closing our ears to hearing complaints.
Well, yes, and I appreciate when you say that. Some commentators don't. But some of I think the reason for the rise of populism and the unpopularity of governments and of the EU is it seems to be that, that people are made to feel stupid and that they don't understand the arguments and that the governments and institutions know best for them, and that's what turns people off.
Yeah. That's right. That's correct.
Turns them towards popular.
That is precisely what. So, Greg, if I can agree with you, that's precisely what turns them off. It doesn't mean the solutions that they turn to are correct. And that's like radicalisation. Not to say, of course, that Brexit voters are radicalised. Before people jump down my throat. But like an analogy, radicalisation, there are legitimate grievances that anger people before they get radicalised. But it doesn't mean that the solutions they turn to, for example, the Iraq War, the Bosnia genocide, legitimate reasons to be angry, but that doesn't mean that Islamist radicalisation is the solution to those grievances. So, of course, Greg, you're correct in saying that there are real grievances and that people were made to feel stupid and weren't listened to, but I would question whether populism as a political alternative is the solution to that. Greg?
No, well, but if it's populist, then it's popular.
No, that's not true, Greg. No, that's not true. In political theory, that's not correct.
It started with the Populist Party in America.
Yeah. Well, no, Brexit. It started with Brexit, and let's gauge if Brexit is popular.
Populism comes from the Populist Party, the late 19th century in America, which was a working class and agricultural labour.
No, but Greg, populist doesn't mean popular.
Popular.
No, Greg. Greg, it's developed its own political meaning. Okay, so that's like, populist has a specific meaning. That's like saying because Madonna was popular as a pop star, she's populist. No, they're two different things, Populist specifically means strong men or women leaders who campaign on a notion that there are those who follow them are patriotic and those who don't follow them are not patriotic or are somehow treacherous, and that they represent the will of the people in all of their policies. Populism is the merger of a political program with patriotism, when actually, in truth, they are two separate things.
Right. Well, that's fine. But then, if it's not popular, then it doesn't matter how successful or not successful populist leaders are. They wouldn't get anywhere.
Oh, that's not true either, Greg. That's not true either, because apart from in Britain, which has always historically been resilient against populist political parties coming to power because of the nature of our first past the post system, which is one of its benefits, though I want reform. In coalition governments, you don't need a majority. Italy is a coalition government, Greg. You don't need a majority over 50% in that sense of a majority to come to power. You just need to have the largest chunk of votes. Same with Israel, by the way. It's a proportionally representative system, which is why Netanyahu has been in power for so long, because the right-wing radical fringe of Naftali Bennett, who are the pro-settler movement, are holding his government, they're propping them up. It's incredibly rare in a first-past-the-post system for that to happen, though, of course, currently, with the Ulster Unionists, I would argue it is happening, where you've got a fringe party, a bunch of Looney Tunes over, abortion rights, for example, propping up Theresa May's government, and she needs to do something about it. Greg?
Well, I would, in Italy particularly, you've got two popular parties on either side of the political spectrum.
Yep.
Because I would say that the Liga are towards the right, and the Five Star are on the left.
Yep. And they vehemently disagree with each other and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And both of them are being decried as populist parties. But by joining together, they are popular. So it doesn't make them any less valid because they are in the majority.
No, but Greg, we're arguing semantics, Greg. Come on. We've got to mature the debate beyond this, right? You and I both know populist in political terminology isn't the same as popular, right? And if two populist parties merge forces, even though they disagree on practically everything else, of course, in sheer number terms, that makes them popular, but that's still politically, in language, very different to the meaning of the word populist. And so to split hairs over that isn't really going to get us anywhere. But Greg, thank you for your call. Rudy from Fulham, go for it.
Yeah, I don't think the EU can be saved. I don't think you can stop populism, because the EU reminds me of the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Titanic sunk because 5 compartments got breached. Yeah, and it could have stayed up with 3 or 4. And the EU's year by year is getting a breach after breach after breach. So England's gone, Poland's basically gone, Hungary's gone.
Matt, the Poland and Hungary have gone. You mean have they Brexited?
Yeah, technically they've gone. They don't listen to anything that the EU says. They do what they want.
Yeah.
They just take, but they don't give anything.
What do you are you pro EU or are you pro Brexit?
I voted to leave because, well, I don't know. I just couldn't vote to stay in.
Doesn't that sentence, folks, to describe what we had? I voted leave because, I don't know why I did. Rudy, I think the problem here, before I let you come back on this, Rudy, I think the concern that we who grew up studying the EU project, working in some capacity or another for an ever closer union. I grew up studying EU law, for example, and the concern we have when you say I voted to leave the EU because I don't know why. I mean, that's the kind of I'm happy you said it because it's why we need this conversation. But also B, I think we can't surely all of us collectively as a country destroy the future of our younger generations and the polity that they want to grow up in because I don't know. that nonchalant approach to the future of the political construct of our nation, I just want to caution against it, because, you know, the young overwhelmingly voted to stay in the European Union, and just imagine, Rudy, how they feel if they hear that the reason you voted against their wishes is because, I don't know. Rudy?
Okay, firstly, I have 4 children, okay? They're all under 16, okay? And when I voted, their future was the first thing on my mind. I didn't care about myself because I'm 52, so I'll be gone soon. But the point is, and as for the young, we keep coming back to this argument about the young. The young get older.
But how could their future be on your mind when you don't know why you voted to leave, Rudy?
I didn't say I don't know why I voted.
Oh, you did say I don't know. I heard you.
Yes, but I meant in the terms of there were so many reasons.
All right, okay.
Put it into one.
I'll take that.
Started laughing almost immediately.
Yeah, no, I'll take that. Well, can you give me a reason?
Yes, I can give you a reason. Yeah. I don't see how my son, my daughters are going to get a job in this country. I really don't see how they are.
Rudy, real wages and employment continue to rise. Actually, interestingly, despite Brexit, we have an incredibly strong economy at the moment, despite the vote on Brexit. I mean, I know we haven't Brexited yet, but even in America, it's the case. The economy is growing. We're slowly, ever so slowly, recovering from the global economic crash. So I'm not so sure, Rudy, why you don't think your 4 daughters are going to get a job.
Because you keep talking to people like me about the economy.
Well, you just said the economy is...
The economy makes no difference to me.
Well, no. It makes a difference to whether your daughters are going to get a job. It may not make any difference to the political consequences of the argument. I've already acknowledged that in this hour. But it does make a difference as to whether your daughters are going to get a job.
How so?
Well, because Rudy, economic growth means job creation, Rudy. Come on, Rudy.
So many jobs in this country. We can afford 3.5 million people from other parts of Europe to give them jobs.
Yeah, that's what economic growth is. But our NHS is telling us that we've got too many shortages for positions that need to be filled. For example, for nurses and doctors, which is why they're asking for Maajid to loosen his immigration restrictions, because we haven't got enough people to fill those jobs. You know, at the end of the day, growth means jobs. But anyway, Rudy, thank you for calling in. I wish you and your 4 daughters the best, actually, and I hope that they do find gainful employment, and I'm sure they will.
Bob has called from Rainham and Dean in Bromley to carry on our conversation about visas and doctors and nurses and other health professionals. Bob, hello.
Oh, good afternoon, yeah. At the same time they're closing down Manston Airport, where you could have got all of the goods planes to go to at the same time.
There you go. I should have opened your line sooner. You could have said it directly to him.
Anyway, okay, how much longer are we going to steal trained people from the developing world who desperately need them? And how many doctors and nurses have we got in training, and how long until we are self-sufficient? If it takes 7 years to train a doctor, by 2025 we should have enough of our own. If not, why not? And the same with nurses. By 2023 we should have enough of our own in training. Or we're not training enough people, and why is that not happening? And why don't we bring back hostels for the training nurses and social housing for the trained nurses, and bring back all the people that can't afford to live near hospitals and work there anymore?
Well, I don't personally have the answer to those questions, obviously, but the chair of the Royal College of GPs was asked just the same questions in an interview I heard her do this morning, and she said a couple of things in answer to your question. She said, we are very careful when we recruit from abroad that we don't leave the local services without. We are also conscious that many people we recruit return to those countries with brilliant necessary skills to take back to those countries eventually after years here in the UK. She also says that it will take, in answer to your question about how long before we've got our own or more British born in the workforce, she says about a decade, and then we can take fewer from abroad, but it'll take about a decade.
Yeah, but if it takes 7 years to get 5 years to train a nurse and 7 years to train a doctor, by 2025, or before then, we should be cutting down, because we just won't need all these people, will we?
Well, we need them now.
Especially with the new modern
but it's the now of it. It's the now of it that we're talking about. That there are vacancies all over the NHS that can't be filled. And when they can be filled, we're told wrong colour.
Well, a lot of those vacancies can't be filled because the people can't afford to live near the hospitals. If they had hostels and they had the social housing for doctors and nurses, I'm sure that you would get a lot of the people that have left the industry, if you like, return.
Well, again, I'll just quote the chair of the Royal College of GPs to you, that the vast majority of people leaving are older, stressed out, burnt out GPs.
Stressed out because of their 4-hour journeys to get into work.
Or stressed out because of the workload, I think, because they can't fill vacancies.
Well, yeah.
You can't deny the vacancies, Bob. They exist.
Well, I'm not saying there are, but of course there are modern methods of nursing. I mean, we've just found out now that 5,000 chemotherapy sessions are unnecessary. When you go into hospital now, you don't go in for like 2 weeks lying in. You go in for a day. You're out the same day, or you're out within 3 days.
And what's your point there? That
my wife had a new hip. She was out walking the next day.
What's your point there about what the hospitals are overstaffed? Is that what you're saying?
That means you don't need all of those people. I mean, to be in all honesty, a lot of the people that work in the hospitals aren't nurses. I mean, the people that make the bed aren't nurses. The people that clean the wards aren't nurses.
Cleaners, yeah. They're still a vital part of a hospital being safe.
Oh, of course it is, absolutely, but they aren't like it used to be when it used to be nurses who did the work and did that as part of their training. So how long does it take to train a nurse? You know?
What's your objection, just out of interest, to foreign doctors and nurses and radiologists?
I've not got any. It's just that I think it's a waste because with
a waste of what?
Globalisation that's going to come upon us with all of these robots and programs and face scanning and all of the tests that they can do. You aren't going to need as many people to work. We aren't going to need as many workers. If you look at the...
No, we do now. Now we do.
Yeah, but we don't.
We do. We do. Vacancies, Bob. I hope you don't get sick anytime soon.
I've had cancer twice, and
It was fine.
I'm seeing my doctor at 6:10 this afternoon.
I'm glad. Not that you've had cancer, that you're seeing your doctor at 6 o'clock this afternoon. Now, I think you're being a bit too... I don't know. You didn't quite answer my question about your objections to foreign doctors, Bob, but thank you very much for your call. Dean in Bromley wants to talk about visas and doctors. Hello, Dean.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, I feel that we have built our British Empire for 400 years on slavery and taking advantage of the Indian subcontinent, and I think it's time we gave back rather than took from them. In my opinion, we should be asking some of the Great Britons like David Lammy or Doreen Lawrence and say, your work here is done. We would really appreciate if you go to some of these other countries and build those...
I'm sorry, say what to David Lammy and who else?
And like Doreen, with truly Great Britons of colour, and say what difference you could make back into society in Jamaica or in India, rather than us keep stealing talent, give some of the talent back to these countries.
What,
so they can build their country to be as great enough.
Well, I don't know where Doreen Lawrence was born, but I do know that David Lammy was born in the UK.
I know, but what I'm saying is that his parents were born in Jamaica or wherever, and we took them from Jamaica to here to build our country great. And
we didn't take them. We didn't take them.
We invited them, but we could ask them, could you go and help the country that we have been effectively enslaved for the last 400 years, and build them as great as we are? Give something back rather.
Would you go?
Take.
Or is it only brown-skinned people who have to go?
No. If you come from a poor country originally, and we've taken advantage of you for 400 years...
I do. Shall I go back to Ireland?
If you could build it as great as Britain and help, that would be a great thing, don't you think?
Should I leave Britain and go to Ireland because my parents left Ireland to come to Britain?
I'm not asking you to leave. I'm saying that if you would...
Well, just David Lammy, then.
Well, he has made Britain great with democracy. Could he not help making his country of his parents' birth great with helping with democracy?
You can do that without emigrating there, can't you?
I'm not asking him to emigrate. I'm asking him to go and help.
But what if a Jamaican or an Indian doctor says, listen, I want to be the best surgeon in, I don't know, maxillofacial surgeon, or one of the best, and the place to learn that is in St Thomas's in London. I want to work there for a decade. I'm going to go and compete for that job. They're quite within their rights to do that, aren't they?
Well, they are, but then you've got some poor Indian boy who needs that surgery. He can't get it because the Indian doctor is busy in St Thomas's, and then he has to go to hell in a handcart. And all we are doing is constantly
No, I mean, well, for a start, India has a monumentally large population for a start, so that's numbers-wise, that's not necessarily true. And many of the doctors and nurses and others who work here for years do take those skills back.
So it's okay to steal their best talent while at the prime of their career, and we can give them back when they're washed up.
But it's not stealing them, washed up or really experienced and skilled.
At the prime of their careers. Yeah, we should be sending our best surgeons to them and training them.
We do. No, we don't. They just don't emigrate. No, we do.
We should be
we do. We do.
So why are we taking talent from abroad then?
Well, I mean, medicine is an international profession. Thank God, because we can all benefit from the knowledge internationally that's garnered.
About giving away all these people you're talking about, why are we advertising for overseas jobs?
Because we've got vacancies we can't fill.
Well, could we send people abroad? In your words, not mine.
No, we're not sending people abroad permanently. I said medicine is an international profession where ideas and skills and people are shared around the world.
Well, the problem is that Britain is greedy and we want everything and we want to give nothing back. Yeah, and then when it comes to time to give something back, no, we want more.
So you want to reduce the numbers of foreign doctors and nurses in this country to favour their own countries, regardless of what those... All right, hang on. Regardless of what those foreign doctors and nurses themselves want, and regardless of vacancies that exist in this country that they could successfully fill.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Dean and Bromley. Chris has called from Victoria. Hello, Chris.
Hello. The last caller made several scientific errors. First of all, it's not their body because their body doesn't have two different blood groups, doesn't have two different noses. It's quite clearly scientifically not their body at all. I'm amazed that people still repeat something so obviously...
Say that again. It's quite clear. Your line isn't great, Chris. It's quite clearly what?
Not their body, because their body doesn't have two different blood groups. It doesn't have two different noses or four different eyes. That's an error that has many times been refuted. I'm amazed people are still repeating that clear error. The second point that he was wrong about was that he's simply saying, it's a matter that, so if you're religious, something to do with being religious. It's to do with the fact that you understand scientifically that the human being is the most amazing thing in the entire world, in terms of intricacy and in terms of how developed it is. What's religious about that? Nothing. Nothing religious about it whatsoever. It's just that you are caring and compassionate, you're logical, you've got common sense, and you take the scientific point of view, which every scientific textbook holds to. These people are anti-science because they are saying that life does not begin at conception, and therefore they are disagreed with by every single scientific textbook. They're just doing it for their own convenience.
Well, there is a certain stages of the pregnancy, Chris. You might be onto something with what the science proves, but the science, when it comes to those very early stages of conception, has not definitively proved anything about not just life. Clearly there is the beginnings of life there, but the debate around abortion is about more than that, isn't it? It's about personhood.
No, they make it about personhood because they know that that's a man-made philosophical concept which can never be accurately defined, and therefore it's sophistry. They deliberately put that concept in the centre because they know that they can never get a satisfactory definition of it by definition.
Yeah, but Chris, speaking of religion, even the churches, plural, didn't regard a miscarried fetus as a life worthy of heaven. They were not. They didn't used to be buried. They didn't used to be regarded as going to heaven. They didn't used to be regarded as part of the Christian family because they hadn't been baptized. Fast forward 150 years, and we have an entirely different argument about the personhood, the value, the intrinsic human value of those fetuses. And you can't have your cake and eat it.
I agree with you because I think the churches are quite wrong on that. I think this is in pre-scientific days. The question is this human or not? And if somebody is human, then that person is of the highest possible species. It is also your own flesh and blood, your own son or daughter. Therefore, there is no question. It's not a particularly controversial thing. Would you kill your own son and daughter?
Well, for you it isn't. For you it isn't.
Nobody could kill their own son and daughter.
Well, sadly they do on quite a regular basis.
It is very sad. It's outrageous. And we are walking the streets with people who would even do that.
Can I bring you back from... Clearly you feel passionately about the fundamental intrinsic issue of abortion. I get that. Let's go back to the question of...
not feelings.
Oh, all right. No, but all right, Chris, I'm just saying what I'd like to do is talk about it now through the prism of Northern Ireland, if I may. Sure. Should Westminster be getting involved in questions around how Northern Ireland interprets the devolved health issue that is abortion as the law stands at the moment.
They obviously think that they're the elite and they're the right-thinking, right-on people who don't even mention the fact that they're killing a human being, which is the central question.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed for your call. Chris, passionate there in Victoria. Scott in Nottingham, hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Scott. How do you see the Miss America decision?
Not a lot to be said, really, other than if you look at it clinically, 50% of the planet are men, 50% of the planet are women, a little bit more, actually. But men like looking at women, women like looking at men. So stop messing with things and leave it be.
And what does leave it be mean?
Well, so you've got, obviously, on the side of the world pageants, there's no disguising it. It's simply it's ogletree, and people like looking at women in bikinis, and there's nothing wrong with that. In the same breath, women go to Magic Mike nights, for example, at pubs and clubs and nightclubs and so on and so forth, and look at male strippers, and so stop banning things. If you're going to ban that, then ban this. And in the meantime, why we're having a discussion about the rights of a woman's possible thoughts and what she may or may not have worn to go into a pageant that she's already pre-decided she's going to go into, and at the end of it she's going to get a paycheck and some celebrity. So I just don't get it. Just leave things be. Stop messing in.
So leave the bikini section in the pageants?
Leave everything be. Stop banning things. Stop worrying about things. Stop harassing, and it's just something for the media to talk about. There's nothing on the news.
Well, you stop banning things, stop talking about things. That wouldn't have got people anywhere, would it? With kids up chimneys and women not being allowed to work and women having to get their father's signature to get a house. If we didn't campaign to ban certain things, then we'd never get anywhere, would we?
I think we've got far enough, don't you?
No, I don't.
In what way?
Well, you first, Scott. Gentlemen first. In what way have we got far enough on equality?
Well, my partner works. I work. Our money is shared. Everything's happy days. There's no problems there. There's no I ask her to wear this or tell her not to wear that. That's just life, and life goes on. She's female, I'm male. And there's no argument to be had.
I'm not talking about your house. I'm talking about society.
As far as society is concerned, it just seems to me that every single time you turn the radio on, flick the TV on, there's always somebody, and I've got to say it's coming from the female point of view, objecting about something.
That men don't object to things?
We should more, really.
Here's your opportunity. What do you want to object to?
Oh, a million and one things.
Oh, go on. Start with one.
Right then. Okay, so let's look at TV, for example. Okay, so every time you see an advert on the TV,
yeah.
Okay, seldom do you see an example of a strong white working man doing a damn good job being a good dad or what have you. They're always the fool guy. They're always the butt of the joke. They're always example. It's then and on the flip side, I pity women because you see adverts for just to pick a brand, say L'Oreal, whatever. Yeah. Now with new jojoba from a monkey's bottom, mined. From the most...
cosmetic nonsense, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Absolute cosmetic nonsense.
Well, that's now the joy of men as well, isn't it? The ads for men are just as ludicrous.
Well, of course they are.
If you shave, you have to be a complete hunk shaving. You can't just be some bloke a bit tired in the morning being bored because he's shaving.
Well, no, I refuse to buy a razor. I will buy the cheapest razor and sort my face out. Every time you put something on the news, on the TV, and there's a new razor come out, buy this, blah, 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 blah.
The best a man can get.
The best a man can get. It's the same thing. It's just a piece of metal you put to your face. So it's not changed in a long, long time. And I don't bow to that either. And it's just really, really sad.
But have you ever been told? Well, you know, we heard earlier on from Dave saying that in his time in the civil service, it was very restrictive as to what men can wear. Can you think of any aspect of your life where there are what you would regard as unjust restrictions placed on you?
No, I quite enjoy wearing a uniform. So if I was to...
Which uniform do you wear, if I may ask?
Well, I'm a salesperson, so I wear a tie and a shirt and a suit, so...
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of pro forma for everyone at work, is it? Men and women?
It's by the by. As long as if I had a female colleague, as long as she looks smart, it bears no difference. So as long as they're smart of appearance, stop whinging about things. Obviously, I'm wrong to have a whinge. But do you see my point?
I do. Just a word on the women in your workplace. Do they have to wear heels?
And this is another thing. Getting back to men like looking at women. It's never going to change.
No, just answer the question about the heels.
Do they have to?
Yeah. Are they encouraged to wear heels at work, or can they come in flats?
I'm going to sound terribly sexist and say I think they should.
So that their leg looks nicer for you to look at?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Scott.
I think we are heading for I don't like these phrases, hard Brexit or soft Brexit, because to me, Brexit is Brexit. It means just leaving the European Union and all of its institutions. But I don't think that that's going to be the end game here, and that's why I've asked this question about betrayal, because I think a lot of people will feel a sense of betrayal if that happens. Pete, thank you. James is in Hornchurch. Hello, James.
Hello there. Yes, I totally agree with the last caller. And I would take it a step further. I believe that these people in the government are absolutely spitting on the graves of the war dead in this country. They fought and died. All the things, all the documentaries we've ever seen, all the films, all the evidence, all the family stories we've ever known about the war and what happened. And the fact that we try to have all these battles to get out of being run by a fascist dictatorship.
Well, look, I can be very virulent in my criticism of the EU, but it is not a fascist dictatorship. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to say.
Anna's called from Haringey. Anna, hello.
Hello, Sheila. Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'd just like to say I'm on the fence here. I follow all journalists across both Spectrum, Remain and Leave, and I've just seen that there is a date now in this thing with the customs union that's coming out with Northern Ireland.
There is a date. No, but there is a date on that page. But it's very interestingly positioned, that date. It's not linked directly to the temporary customs arrangement.
And there's the word experts apparently, which it actually you could say it's meaningless. So we'll put that to one side. But
I don't think we can put it to one side, Anna, because to my mind, if people haven't heard it, let me just remind people where the mention of a date is. On the time limit of this agreement, this temporary agreement, the backstop agreement, it says the UK is clear that the temporary customs arrangement, I should say, not agreement, arrangement, should be time limited, and that it will be only in place until the future customs arrangement can be introduced. It then talks a bit more with no dates mentioned, and then at the end of the same paragraph it just says the UK expects the future arrangement to be in place by the end of December 2021. Now that's almost that is, to my mind, that is as legally binding as if they had just said Sheila's birthday is January the 13th. She was born in 1966. You know, it's just a date, but it isn't connected to the temporary customs arrangement in any direct or binding way.
I think that's been worded very, very carefully, and
it's a sop to David Davis.
It is,
and it's meaningless
because David Davis's resignation would have, I for certain would have felt that Theresa May's her premiership would have been up definitely.
Well, if people had followed him, you know, would Johnson have followed him? Would Gove follow him?
Well, either
out the door.
Gove, Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, any of those three, and I think that was the pivotal sort of situation we'd have, and then you'd have a Brexit Prime Minister, which obviously would have been a lot more different to where we are now. That's where I see the dynamics, and of course, I think, to be honest with you, Theresa May's played this very well. I was listening to Ian Duncan Smith today, and he sort of hit it on the nail. We've done this back to front, really. The trade talks should have been done first. We should have arranged that. Instead, we've had a situation where we've been boxed in to have this customs arrangement put in before the trade talks, because obviously if the trade talks had been done, all that would have come into plan with the customs arrangements as well, you see. But of course we've been boxed in with this stupid arrangement with the European Union, which has made us have our hands held behind our back. And I think that was done deliberately by Theresa May, because she knew then we would be in this position which would pacify a lot of her Remain MPs and constituents. I mean, that's where I think it's all gone down to.
That all along she's had a kind of Remain plough that she's been...
Yeah, and she's been...
Furrow, I should say, that she's been ploughing.
And she's been trying to convince the Leave electorate that she's going to do everything and this. At the same time, this was the plan all the way along. And I'm sorry, that's how I feel. And I cover all the spectrum. I don't look through one prism, but I'm seeing how it's fitting in now. And this is where it's coming to clear, obviously, because we had this deadlock this afternoon with the document. So
is she betraying the voters who won the referendum?
Yes, definitely. I feel betrayed.
Do you?
I'm a Conservative member, and I feel betrayed.
And she's betrayed you how? Because this feels like staying in, does it to you?
Well, I think she's tried to bluff the public and the electorate. This is what she's tried to do with technicality, and I'm just dismayed, really. I feel very disappointed.
But for her not to disappoint you, she would have had to stay in a position that would have meant David Davis walking out the door, probably, wouldn't it? And that would have brought her down, potentially.
Yes.
I know I'm putting two and two together.
Yeah, I know. But in my eyes, because she's betrayed me, and probably a lot like me, that might have been the best outcome. And I wouldn't have blamed David Davis for resigning.
Well, let me bring in James. You might have a thought on what he says, Anna. I might come back to you. James, you think David Davis has betrayed the nation. How so?
Yeah, well, I do, Sheila. I agree totally with that lady's been saying. But David Davis should have done this for a point. He should have walked out, because I feel we have been betrayed. 17.4 million of us have been betrayed. We've been betrayed as bovine cowards, racists, bigots for the last, over 2 years. We haven't got our foot out the door. We won't get our foot out the door till 2021, presumably. That won't be cast in stone, because I will tell this now to Theresa May and all you Ramonas out there. The joy you taste right now will turn to ashes in your mouth. We may not have our chance now, but there's 17.4 million of us. We will have our chance.
Well, hang on, James. You're speaking as though Brexit is over.
But it is. You've betrayed us. Free movement of people will continue till 2021. The European courts will continue till 2021.
It's only a couple of years away. It's almost 2019, James.
Yes, and we should have left. We should have left.
Yeah, but there's Theresa May has always spoken about an ordered transition, hasn't she? An ordered exit.
Well,
there's a lot at stake, James. Detail.
Well, Sheila, I am so angry. Look, the Remainers, have your wish. You can keep us in the EU. I do not care anymore. I have lost interest. I will pay the government of the day back in 2021 when we go to the polls. I am so angry, Sheila. I'm going to have to end the call.
OK, thank you, James. But I want to know how you'll vote in the next election, but he's run away. He's not going to tell me.
Let's go to Simon in Sidcup. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
All right, thank you. What would you like to tell me?
Well, the trouble is with all these problems that are thrown up, you've got two parties who don't really want to deal. Theresa May don't want to deal. She's an arch Remainer.
Well, she isn't an arch Remainer. She isn't an arch Remainer. She did vote Remain, but she didn't exactly campaign for it, did she?
No, she's done the John Major. She disappeared to the dentist.
Exactly.
She went AWOL, didn't she? I think there was more to that than meets the eye. But all right, we'll discard the word arch. She's a Remainer. Obviously, the EU don't want to do a deal. It's a bit like putting a vegan in charge of the hog roast. It's not going to end well, is it?
Well, how do you think it is going to end then?
It'll be a fudge. It'll be a long, drawn-out fudge with us getting very little. the EU don't want us to succeed. The last thing they want to do is us ride off into the sunset doing deals all around the world, becoming successful. So their vested interest is to keep us, in negotiations for as long as they possibly can, which is all part of the unwritten rules of the establishment. We scratch your back, you scratch ours. So these toing and froings are just going to continue doing nothing hard is done. Apart from us saying,
so you think it's all a massive plot, that actually the British government is in cahoots with the European Commission? I mean, seriously?
I don't know about the British government. I mean, you said earlier that that she's got a divided cabinet. Well, she could easily solve that, can't she? Just put a packet full of Brexiteers.
Well, the political realities of life in the House of Commons means that you can't do that, because you have to keep your party together. Otherwise, your whole government collapses. I think if she decided to sack all of the Remainers in the cabinet and replace them with Brexiteers, there really would be a civil war in the Conservative Party. So that's never going to happen. Simon, thank you.
The woman with spectacles in the second row from the back there.
I absolutely agree with Richard Madeley. What this country needs is Winston Churchill moment. It needs our government to stand up for the democratic right of what the people voted for and get us fully out of Europe.
This up there.
Not at all.
What do you make of it? What do you make of it? All right, you.
Sorry, me.
Yeah, go on.
We're the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We voted to leave. Says pull up anchor and sail away, okay? And then we'll be able to sort ourselves out. And then Europe will look to us.
It's not an Enya song. Sail Away is a lovely song, but you need to go somewhere, so do you know what I mean?
Robert in Dulwich, what does Mrs May need to do in this area? Good morning.
Oh, Nick. Good morning, sir. Thank you for taking the call.
Not at all.
I'm just calling in to actually tell everyone, and I'm sure you probably know, this is just all a nonsense. It's got nothing to do with people caring about the women in Northern Ireland not being able to have an abortion. This is stirring by Remainers. This is part of a coordinated campaign to undermine the vote for Brexit in this country. All they really want to do is cause Theresa May the anguish and the discomfort of having to go to Northern Ireland and tell the DUP, sorry, women should have an abortion. They don't.
You don't see that it's rather extraordinary that a woman living in Northern Ireland can now not avail herself of an abortion if she needed to, whereas the whole of the rest of the United Kingdom and fairly soon south of the border as well, she would be able to.
Do you know what, Nick? You know what I think?
Go on.
I think it's up to the people there to have their parliament come back and make that decision for themselves. It's not these people.
I agree.
Go around Moron.
You mean the Assembly? Do you mean Northern Ireland Assembly?
Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, look, we're so used to people coming in and pontificating sanctimoniously and telling everyone what they should do. What we should all do is aim. We have the devolved part. They've got their devolution powers, whatever. Use them.
I know, but we haven't got the Assembly sitting. Robert, thank you.
Alex is in Pimlico. Alex, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Cards on the table, Brexit here, loving Trump's work, and...
What's your favourite bit?
Well, all of it, but I think what you...
No, your favourite bit. What's the thing he's done that you love the most?
You said you bumped into Boris yourself.
Go on, mate. I just asked you a question. You said cards on the table. You said cards on the table, but you're not letting me look at your cards. That's an odd way of playing.
Because I want to just cut to the chase. Boris...
No, cards on the table. What's the thing Trump's done that you love the most?
Because he is a man of his word.
What's he done that you love the most?
Pardon?
What's he done that you love the most? You said, I'm loving his work. So what's the act of...
Because he's a politician who tends to, unlike here, do what he says.
Yeah, so what's he done? Well, what's the thing he's done? What's the act of work he's done?
Not in tune with the American politics.
Cards on the table, I love his work. Give me one example of the work that you love. Over to you, Alex.
Balls of steel. Okay.
No, but you're going to have to answer it before we carry on, because it's cards on the table, Alex. Those are your own words, mate.
Because he's very much like Boris. He's a cad, he's a rogue, he's always...
No, but we know all that. You said you love his work. You said cards on the table, I love his work. So show me one card. They're on the table, Alex.
What I'm trying to say to you is he's a politician, but he's not of the normal politician.
Cards on the table, Alex. Just show me one of those cards that you said in that really upbeat way. Cards on the table, James. I love his work. So show me one card. One card.
James.
One card.
Some people voted Brexit, others didn't. And
one card, Alex.
Carry on.
One card.
I'm not with you, Jane.
One card.
But I'm not with you, Jane. I'm trying just to...
I love his work. Cards on the table. Give me one example of the work that you love.
So much work, because Jane...
So much work. So much work. It'll be really easy to give me one example.
No. Everybody in London voted for him, remember?
Nobody in London voted for Donald Trump. Give me one example of the work he's done that you love, Alex.
People voted for Boris, remember?
Cards on the table, Alex. Cards on the table, Alex. Show me a card.
I'm just not that in tune with American politics to give you a definite answer, but I'm trying to say...
Right,
Boris,
so when you said cards on the table, what you meant was, I don't even know whether I'm playing Snap or poker.
No, I'm trying to say to you, Boris... You have to embrace what he is. And people voted for him, right or wrong. He is a bit of a clown. He's everything you said he is. And I think he orchestrated this leakage. I think a friend of that recorded that. It was all done on purpose and construed to make a lot of media interest and chaos talking about Boris. And remember, when he went on the Mar show talking about Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, he inadvertently spilled the beans of his MI6, MI5 briefings straight out the bar.
No, he didn't know now. So, you see, not only have you made a complete cretin of yourself, you've also just libelled the Foreign Secretary.
Why not? Everyone else does.
No, mate. You see, cards on the table, Alex. You're a clown.
She might not expect EU leaders to give her a helping hand.
Can we have a shaking hand, please?
But surely she could rely on her Foreign Secretary. Back home, though, Boris Johnson's been secretly recorded, suggesting Theresa May could learn something from the American president.
Imagine Trump doing Brexit. What would he do? He'd go in bloody hard. There'd be all sorts of breakdowns. There'd be all sorts of chaos. Everyone would think he'd gone mad. But actually, you might get something. So very, very good call.
So did the Prime Minister feel undermined by those remarks?
People like Boris have strong views on Brexit, but so do I. I want to deliver Brexit for the British people. That's what people want.
Sir Gerald Howarth joins me, president of the Conservative Way Forward, the group who were hosting the event, former Conservative MP for Aldershot, I should say, who wasn't at the dinner. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
Do you wish you'd been at the dinner now?
Yes, I'd love to have been there because I thoroughly applaud what Boris has been saying, and I think his remarks, whilst I very much regret the fact that somebody betrayed his confidence, nevertheless, I think the result has been that many very despondent and gloomy Brexiteers, people who voted for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union, will have taken heart from the fact that these are the views of the man in charge of our foreign policy. And I think that he's absolutely right in a number of the things he said. And as it happens, I had been speaking to him earlier in the week, and so these views did not come as a surprise to me.
Who do they harm?
I frankly don't think they harm anybody, because everybody knows that this is an issue which divides parties, it divides families, and it is the issue of our times. The people voted by a clear majority, but not a huge majority, but a clear majority, that Britain should leave the European Union. It was never going to be easy after 45 years engaged in this 1950s defunct construct. And so there are bound to be passions on both sides. And I think that in setting out his stall as he's done, he's not only encouraged people in the country who supported Britain's departure from the EU, but I think he'll have sent a very clear message to those negotiating in Brussels that there is likely to be a renewed intent on the part of the British government to negotiate much harder than it has done. And I think from the Prime Minister's point of view, she has explicitly said time after time, Britain is leaving the European Union, we're leaving the customs union, we're leaving the single market. Well, what is emerging from Downing Street on the detail, as we saw yesterday with David Davis, is, well, it's not quite as straightforward as that. And I think it needs to be straightforward. And I think that Boris Johnson has shown the way in which it can be straightforward.
Does Theresa May lack guts?
I don't think she does lack guts.
Well, that's what his comments amount to.
Well, what I do think is that we, as a country, have lacked guts. I'm a Eurosceptic because I was brought up in Germany. I speak some German. I understand the German mentality. I've been watching these negotiations like everybody else. The negotiators on the other side have been crystal clear. They see Britain's departure as a threat to their project to create the United States of Europe. Therefore, they are not in the mood to give us anything like a kind of good deal. This is nothing to do with trade. It has everything to do with politics. We stand in the way. We are likely to frustrate their desire to create this.
Where is Boris Johnson's professionalism in this? You know, he's the Foreign Secretary, she's the Prime Minister. He's taken a coach and horses through her reputation.
Well, that's the way some are interpreting. I'm not interpreting it thus. And indeed, of course...
Donald Trump would do it better. Better than whom? He means better than her.
I don't think he does. I think that he's referring to the negotiators. The Prime Minister is in a difficult position because she is having to balance those in the Cabinet who are in favour of some kind of compromise, in my view, far too much of a compromise, against those like Michael Gove, Boris Johnson and Liam Fox, who take a much more robust attitude, and the Prime Minister has to try and manage those. My view, though, is that having served with her in the House of Commons for many years, having spoken to her about this issue, I do genuinely believe that the Prime Minister is committed to Britain leaving the European Union on the 29th of March next year. The issue is whether she is going to listen to people like her civil servants, in particular the Foreign Office, which of course is the hotbed of cold feet, and has been completely enamoured of this European project from the start. She has got to persuade them and tell them as Prime Minister they've got to stop. We are leaving and they need to make sure it works. This idea that the whole thing can be held up by some argument about the Irish border, it's nothing to do with the United Kingdom. We don't want a fixed border. There is a border already because there are different taxes on it.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. That is clearly the EU having a position on that border as well as the UK having a position on that border. But but you cannot deny that the reality of the Brexit vote opened up that issue. It did. It wasn't Ireland that opened up that issue. It was the referendum vote that opened up that issue.
Yes, but we're a sovereign nation, and thank God we're going to be a properly sovereign nation once again. And we are leaving the European Union.
And we have one hard border with a foreign nation.
The Irish, who were neutral during the Second World War, if that upsets the Irish, tough. You come up with an idea. It is
who were neutral during the Second World War. So what? So it's what? They're cowards. We shouldn't listen to them.
I do not believe that we should be held to ransom by the Irish, and the EU is using the Irish issue nakedly to undermine Britain's position. And Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, was spot on yesterday, night before last rather, when he said that this Irish issue is a question of the tail wagging the dog. I personally believe it is insulting. It's your problem, Ireland. If you don't want a fixed border, fine, but the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, and if you want to make some arrangements, fine, but you are not going to hold the sixth largest economy in the world, a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, to ransom in order to play the game of the...
Yeah, well, you know, you can say that as much as you like, and you can allude to the Second World War as much as you like, but the reality is that when we leave the European Union, we have one border with a foreign nation. That foreign nation is Ireland. It's a member of the EU, and certain things, whether you like it or not, flow from that, Gerald Howarth.
Well, of course, but Switzerland has a border with the EU. Sweden and Finland have. Norway have borders. Norway has a border with the EU. These are not insuperable problems. Technology is going to come to.
Nobody said they were insuperable, but they're problems. They're issues to be faced. They're things to be agreed upon. But saying we won the war isn't really going to cut it, is it?
Well, I'm not just saying we. I'm making the point. That Britain is a substantial nation, one of only 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. We are the biggest defence players in Europe. And I very much regret that the Prime Minister has thrown away our security card. The Continentals are now telling us that our British companies will be excluded from any defence deals in Europe. It's pathetic. Britain is the major player in defence in Europe. And I do find it, and many of my fellow countrymen find it pretty insulting that, in the words of Margaret Thatcher, nations we either rescued or defeated, should now be telling us what to do, standing in our way of fulfilling the express wish of the British people, put to a referendum, that Britain will leave the European Union.
Do you see everything through the prism of the Second World War? Do you see everything?
Sorry?
Do you see everything through the prism of the Second World War?
That's an absurdity. I didn't say that.
Well, you've just referred to nations we either defeated or rescued. I'm presuming you were referring to the Second World War.
I am referring to that, but that was an aside.
But Ireland's role in the Second World War, that's dictating your view on the Irish border question. I just wondered whether it's the prism through which you see every political issue.
It's not the prism through which I see every political issue, but I am looking at this in terms of the history. And there is a lot of resentment out there amongst the people I speak to who feel that the British government has not negotiated hard enough. They do find it, they do resent the fact that these other countries are unwilling to deal with us properly. We have made all the concessions all the way through. There have been no concessions made by the other side, and that's the point that Boris Johnson was making.
OK, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sir Gerald Howarth, President of the Conservative Way Forward. They were the group hosting that event, former Conservative MP for Aldershot. Helen has called from Gosport. Hi, Helen.
Hi. For me, I agree with well, I wasn't there. I don't know if the tape's been doctored, but it appears to me that the real issue is that we mustn't make a side issue cloud where we're going. Obviously, there are things that the Irish have to sort out. We can't forever play a paternalistic role. It suits, of course, the Commission very much to stir this up because they're after federalism, and without us, they're not going to get it. Federalism, as Monsieur Jacques Lang said in 1997, federalism might make Eurosceptics laugh, but with the creation of the euro, this was back then, the halfway stage would be reached. Everything else that he lined up is in place. Verhofstadt, in his February speech, actually laid out his vision of federalism, which is their next goal. And that includes the Commission setting Europe's taxes. That's what it's all about.
Yes, but we needn't worry about that because we've decided to leave, Helen. So
exactly.
But how does it strengthen our position at this stage in the negotiations for one of the most senior government ministers, the foreign minister, the foreign secretary, to so clearly undermine the prime minister in public, ultimately in public?
I don't know that was the main point.
If he says Trump could do it better, Helen, if he says Trump can do it better, he isn't saying the President of the United States can do it better than the civil servants that we're sending to Brussels. He's saying the President of the United States could do it better than the Prime Minister of Great Britain. How dare he? Even just in basic manners, how dare he do that?
Well, obviously it's not a very polite thing to do, but as I said, the real issue here is whether you let side issues completely take over where the whole focus must be.
And by side issues, you mean Ireland, do you?
Yes.
OK, Helen, thank you. Do call if you're listening in Ireland, north or south. 0345 6060 973, the number to call. It's a side issue, says Helen. Boris Johnson is completely within his rights to take Theresa May's approach to pieces. Is he? Roy, first of all, hello.
Hello. Okay, lovely to speak to you.
You too.
I'm not in agreement with yourself, I don't think. I think Boris was right to say what he said, although it wasn't meant to be publicly known. But I think it was like to stir something up to get something to happen because it's not happening. The fact that it's going on like it is doing more damage to the country. We're having to look at the bill we're going to have to pay. Well, we don't have to pay anything. So why have we got to pay these millions where we've been a cash?
Oh, we've already agreed that. Too late.
Well, it's too late. Oh, yeah, that's the answer, isn't it? Everything's too late. It's not what the people voted for. And it's just what people voted for is not happening, and it's being delayed and delayed and delayed, and they're hoping it's going to not happen.
Do you think that in a way his speech, let's just imagine, I don't believe this, but let's imagine for a second, he thought it was going to remain private. Do you think he was basically doing a bit of a Trump himself, saying, in the way that Trump went out there and started to call Kim Jong-un names and say, we're coming at you, we'll obliterate you, blah, blah, blah. He's now, strutting his stuff out loud saying, yeah, well, the EU, they better get ready because we're going to show some guts now. We're going to do it Trump style. Do you think that's what he was up to?
I think it could be.
But you welcome that, do you? You see, I find that faintly ridiculous, but you welcome it, do you?
Well, I don't actually welcome it, but somebody needs to... I used to think the BBC were wonderful. There's stuff being advertised. Well, not advertised. There's been stuff about, say, like, for instance, Sir James Dyson. He's a very, very successful businessman. He had it interviewed and they didn't air it because it was pro-Brexit, because he knew how to deal with EU, Brussels, because he said, they won't deal with you, they will not deal with you. He said, and you walk away. And when you walk away, they want your business, so they will come back and deal with you. Then you'll get a proper negotiation deal going. We haven't done that. We've just been bowing down to everything that they're saying.
All right, thank you very much, Roy. Roy in West Wickham.
First, let's go to Lisa, who's in Barnet this afternoon. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
When Boris Johnson talks about needing more guts in the negotiations, what do you think he means?
I totally agree. I'm quite honestly, I'm fed up with this namby-pamby behaviour that Britain seemed to have. We need to stand up to the Brussels gang, as I call them, and put in sanctions. Stop, reduce imports until they give us a date that we can leave.
Well, we've got a date that we leave. We've got a date. It's the end of March 2019. Why
can't we just turn round to them and say, look, if you want to play hardball, we'll reduce the amount of imports we take from you?
Well, because that might damage our economy.
Well, for the time being, otherwise we're always giving in to them. They want to set an example to us anyway, to every other country who might potentially want to leave the EU as well. So they need to set an example and make it as difficult as possible for us.
Is that to say then that you'd be better? It would be better to see us talk more about walking away permanently if we are not able to get the deal that we want?
I think so. I just think we just have to be a bit more ruthless. I think just rolling over, it's ridiculous. I think we have to start putting our foot down.
And the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, saying, actually, we need to be much more conciliatory. That's the way that you go about getting a deal, you would say is rubbish.
Yes, I think everybody's been rolling over at the moment, and nobody seems to have any structure or actually any I want to say something else, but any confidence in going forward and taking this forward. I would have voted Remain. I wouldn't have voted Leave just yet. But having had the referendum and the Leave was unanimous, I think we should leave. I think we should listen to the people. And I think people should be half glass full instead of half glass empty all the time.
Well, I agree with the idea that the democratic imperative is an important one. And if people have voted for something, politicians should go about trying to make it happen. But the problem with having a referendum on a complex issue was that nobody was quite sure what the answer to the question of what does Brexit look like when they took that decision. And everybody's got their own view of what it should look like. Lisa, thank you. Let's come back to your calls then on Russia. 5:41 is the time. David has called from Ealing. Hi, David.
Hi, Tom. I'm a second-generation Russian. My father was born in Russia, although I was born in this country. But that's only important, the fact that I make an objective opinion about these things. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people are looking at it from the Russian point of view. I mean, the Russians have been very, very defensive over centuries, over decades. And the situation where people are blaming Russia for all these problems is simply not true. I mean, on the three issues of Ukraine, Georgia and Syria, the Russians have been on the defensive, particularly in Ukraine.
I mean, they did on the offensive side annex Crimea.
No, they didn't. No, they did not.
Well, they took land from another country that wasn't their own.
No, they did not. No, that's simply not true.
So Russian military did not go into another country.
No, they did not. The Russian military were already in Crimea, have always been there.
Why did they then take that country for themselves and part of it anyway? Well, why is Crimea then part of Russia, as they would see it?
Because there was a referendum, a democratically organised referendum, which we did in the Falklands, for instance, which decided the future of Crimea. The people in Crimea are all mostly Russians. They voted in a 90-odd% referendum. 90% voted to return the Crimea back to the motherland.
Well, Ukraine also had a referendum which they voted to decide to have closer ties with the EU, and then that was undermined, arguably, by Russian intervention.
It wasn't, because there was a coup. There was a fascist coup in Kiev. It was not a democratically elected government in Kiev.
Okay,
it was a fascist coup.
Do you think Russia, as a state, I'm not talking about the people, but do you think Russia as a state has done anything wrong, or that breaks the international rules and order that people stand by, that the West tends to stand by? Do you think Russia has done anything to break that in the last few years?
No, I certainly do not.
Nothing.
No, because the Russians have always been, right from the Second World War and before, a defensive country. They've always tried to protect their borders. Now NATO's right up to their borders. America certainly wouldn't allow Russian troops right on their borders. The Russians are looking at it from a defensive point of view. Ukraine was fine. It was okay until the Americans got involved in producing this coup. The Americans supported the coup, and the Americans organised the government in Ukraine. It's all on.
Well, David, I'm just slightly astonished that you can say that Russia hasn't done anything to meddle with other countries, with their international systems, as I say, when it comes to things like, for instance, their role in Syria, their role in potentially the use of a nerve agent in the United Kingdom, certainly their help in using chemical weapons in Syria, their role in as I have to say potentially their role in bringing down a passenger airline in Ukraine in MH17.
No. I'm sorry,
what about South Ossetia when they brought troops into that country?
Georgia attacked. This is now known a fact. Georgia attacked. It attacked South Ossetia and killed lots of people. It was only 2 days after that attack by Georgia invading South Ossetia, the Russians came back to defend it.
What about assassination of journalists?
Well, we don't know. There's no proof about it. There's no evidence to say this. Journalists have been killed by the Ukrainians. Russian journalists have been killed by the Ukrainians at the time of the war against the East, which also killed 20,000 people of Donbass region. No one in Kiev was killed. The Ukrainian fascists and the brigades from Kiev, and there were about 3 or 4 of them, attacked and bombed the Donbass region and killed 20,000 people. I know you're blaming Russia for defending the Russian population in these countries when they have every right to do so.
Briefly and finally, you would suggest that everything that has been levelled at Russia when it comes to their involvement in state-sponsored acts of what some people might call terrorism, certainly when it comes to cybercrime, all those kinds of things, you would say are all false. All of them are wrong.
They are, comparatively, the Americans fixed the election in Russia when Yeltsin took over. They brought Yeltsin into power. And it was only when Yeltsin destroyed and utterly destroyed the Russian country that Putin came in to save it again. So you've got to look at it from the Russian point of view. The Russians were utterly devastated when the Yeltsin regime put in by the Americans was in power. But Putin's only doing what I would
just simply,
say
David, again, simply, you would say Russia has done nothing wrong at all.
The things that the examples you're giving me, certainly not. If you can think of so many other examples, I'm happy to discuss that. But as far as
we could talk about financial crime, but we'd be here all day.
Well, look, Russia's now a capitalist country. It has oligarchs, which I'm totally against. Oligarchs in Britain, which have fled from Putin, and oligarchs in Russia. These criminals, these crooks, these mafia, took control of the country after the fall of the communist regime, and they devastated Russia.
But
the vast majority of Russian people were utterly devastated by the Yeltsin years. He had a 6% approval rating until the Americans came in, and this is what happened. The Americans interfered with the elections in Russia, certainly, and in Ukraine. The Americans intervened in Russia, set up Yeltsin as the president, and then Trump proceeded to.
Look, David, you are making these assertions in the same way that you would suggest that I was making assertions about Russia by providing absolutely no evidence whatsoever about them. We have to leave it there for time reasons, but I appreciate your call. Let's come back to your calls on Russia. Dave is in Kingston. Hi, Dave.
Hi there, Tom. I wanted to say that the UK at the moment is making fortunes, millions, billions, on selling arms to Saudi Arabia, a brutal dictatorship, and they use those arms to suppress their own people and to actively kill civilians in Yemen. And I wanted to ask you if you believe that we're judging Russia by different standards than we judge ourselves.
No.
Okay, well, we've completely destroyed the Middle East. We use depleted uranium in our ammunitions, which causes all disgusting birth defects, cancer. This is something which may have been an approved...
So hang on a sec, Dave. I want to get you to your point, because I think
that we have completely destroyed the Middle East. The death toll is ever rising, and we are the main contributors to this complete mess.
Remind me again what role Russia plays in all of this in the Middle East.
I'm asking you if you don't think that we judge ourselves by different standards, or we judge Russia by different standards than we judge ourselves. Because if it's down to having a moral foreign policy, then why are we there? Why is the United States there? And if it's down to having the biggest economy, then why isn't China there? They're the second biggest economy.
Well, because it's not just based on the size of your economy about whether you come to those kinds of forum, whether you are the largest economy. It is down to your reliance upon and your upholding of the international laws and orders that help run the world and make it a safer place. You talk about foreign policy in the Middle East. I put it to you, Dave, that Russia hardly has its hands clean when it comes to involvement in the Middle East, propping up a regime such as Assad's that is brutally killing hundreds and thousands of its own people.
But do you really think that we do? And do you really think that America does?
America does what?
Do you really think that we have a clean moral...
No, absolutely not. I'm not saying for a moment that we have a clean moral, but I'm not. But you can't say that Russia doesn't either. It is in nobody comes out. Hang on a sec, Dave. Nobody comes out of wars in the Middle East with anything other than blood on their hands and the terrible things that have been wrought in that part of the world as a result of poor interventions by Western countries and others. But you can't say that because we did it, therefore it makes Russia's behaviour okay, because there's not just its involvement in the Middle East that we can look to. There's plenty of other stuff as well, not least in the Ukraine.
But you're saying that the criteria to be in the G7 is that you have a good moral compass. But you're also saying that clearly the United Kingdom doesn't have that, and neither does the United States have that.
Well, I'm not saying that everybody. I'm not saying that people in those institutions are whiter than white. Of course, they're not, because countries over many years have made terrible mistakes, such as our own intervention in Iraq. That was a total disaster. But Dave,
we have blood on our hands.
But Dave, you cannot just overlook some of the behaviour that is levelled at Russia, not just when it comes to the Middle East.
But you're overlooking ours.
I'm not. I've absolutely suggested that we have not covered ourselves in glory when it comes to Iraq.
You're supporting the case that the United States should be in there, and you're supporting the case that Britain should be in there as well.
I support the case that Britain should be in there, because I do think that this country upholds standards and transparency and law and order in a way that Russia does not display that.
How can you say that when we have...
Because you only have to look at what they do. You only have to look at what Russia is doing in certain parts of the world when it comes to the all-out information warfare that we're seeing, when it comes to cyber attacks, when it comes to the potential use of a nerve agent on British soil, to think that Russia might not be playing by the rule book, Dave.
And you think that we're playing by the rule book, do you? You think it's easy to point your finger, but what about looking at us and looking at the deaths that we're causing right now?
We'll leave it there. I appreciate your time. Dave, thank you very much indeed for your call. Thank you for your call in that hour of the programme.